On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Ron Williams. He's the founder and CEO of Kindle. We're going to be talking about AI models. And what do I mean by that? We're going to be talking about if it's not your model, it's not your future. Something Ron said that I thought was really interesting that we're going to dive into, talking about the present and a little bit about the future, talking about the business versus consumer side of it. And I think we're going to be talking about how to secure some of this stuff, because obviously that's a bit of Ron's background. We're going to dabble in a lot of stuff and hopefully get through all of it. Ron, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. All right, before we start, tell everyone what you guys do at Kindle.
Yeah, so Kindle is a startup based in Venice, California, next to Santa Monica. We build an AI orchestration platform that lets mostly mid-size and larger companies attach any AI capability that's in the market. So you can think of those as like AI models, the ChatGPT models or the Anthropic models, Google's, Microsoft's, whatever, plus all the open source stuff that's out there. And then their data sources as well into Kendo. And now IT and security from a single pane of glass can manage which model is allowed to see which data, which user is allowed to expose which data to which model, for example. And kind of give you that centralized control, then a complete audit trail of all the AI activity happening in the organization, which can be important for security and compliance reasons, but also for IP protection, intellectual property protection. You might want to know in the future, what did the AI create versus what the human created. So, and then, we ship all the tools you need to use it as well, the chatbot, the system builder, the no-code agent builders. So it should be a whole kind of turnkey package to let businesses quickly deploy AI to all of their employees.
Very cool. Very cool. I guess, there'll be a couple areas we're going to touch on, and maybe the part to start with first is a lot of what we've seen in the last 24, 36 months in terms of the public view of AI has been driven by a couple of firms, ChatGPT being one of them. Consumers are very comfortable with the notion of putting in some information, getting a prompt. Everyone seemingly is happy that, hey, there's a response and I'm taking this response as potentially the right answer, not the right answer. Somebody can evaluate that themselves. But this notion that we can copy whatever we want, paste it into a GPT, an LLM, and kick out answers, it seems great for the consumer at home. About the business implications in terms of securing a company, that seems like a big problem.
Yeah, for sure. It's, there's all kinds of, concerns that a business should have when their data is leaving, whether it's going to a traditional SaaS app or a cloud thing or into an AI. But AI brings, new risks into it. The way to think about it, whether you're on the consumer or the enterprise side, is, we're in this pretty big shift away from the cloud model of thinking about how we store data, and I can explain that a little bit. We took about, I don't know, as cloud came into the early 2000s, mid 2000s, late 2000s, and going into 2010, there was initial reluctance by businesses to trust it with their data. Amazon was selling S3 storage services, and Google had Gmail and all this stuff, and everybody was like, I don't want my data off my network. I'm not sure what these cloud providers are, and we started to learn to trust them. And today, for cloud data, Google, Amazon, or even Apple in your personal life, Meta, even, or Microsoft, they're pretty world class at securing your data. I would actually, if you ask me, I would pick Google if I had to bet my life on someone to store my data. But storing your data for future use by yourself is a different risk than what you're doing with AI. With AI, you're actually kind of hiring this super smart alien intern to look at your data, think about your question about the data, come up with a response and give it back to you. And so you're exposing to this, alien intern a whole lot more information about the data, to the point where, it could step into your shoes and probably ask that same question and get an answer later as well, right? So you're not just sending some business data or some personal data that a cloud provider might hack, or in a worst case scenario, let's say you didn't trust the Google and you're worried they're going to look at your data to try to compete with you or something, or even sell it or whatever. That might hurt you a little bit, like some of your data's out there, and a competitor has your customer list, but that competitor still has to go out and figure out what you're doing with that customer list and how you're working with those customers. But once you start working with an AI with your customer list, you're teaching and showing the AI how you think about that customer list and what you're doing with it and why you're doing it and which ones are better, because you're having those conversations going back and forth with this entity. And that's an entirely new group of data and much bigger business risk that you're taking when you trust one of these cloud providers exposing with your data. And so that's the key thing to always have in mind now. It's a whole nother level of on the consumer side, privacy risk; on the work side, competitive risk, or even the employee at work. Is this thing going to learn my job and come after me or come after my business? And those are very valid, real concerns. Silicon Valley actually has a history of competing with its customers, right? Like Amazon is infamous. Amazon launches Prime Video to compete directly with Netflix, which is totally dependent on Amazon's infrastructure. Is probably one of the great examples, but it's all over the place. And also these startups or tech companies are pretty infamous about taking away developer access in the future too. So maybe they want you building stuff, they learn what you want to build, how you're making money, and then they kick the developers off the platform. Twitter did this to developers. Meta has done this to developers. Pretty much everybody has done it. And so there's real risk. There's real competitive risk with these large cloud companies now. They have to grow too. And it's the key thing that I think everybody should think about.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things there that I want to follow up with you. One, obviously, the comparison to where the cloud was, and it took people forever to make a decision that it's safe to store their data in a public cloud out there. And now we're looking at something where with GPT, LLM models, it's learning. It's not just storing your data, as you said. And if you're thinking about the security risk from the perspective of before, I was worried about taking it off my private network and putting it in the cloud. Now I'm actually providing an opportunity for something to learn. So it's not just the pure data, it's actually the learning, the semantics of that data. As a company would start, and obviously we're just at the infancy, but as a company starts looking at these solutions and they're looking at their security infrastructure, their security policies, opening an email is still something we see, right? Please don't click on these links in the email. That still goes out. I mean, a CISO would probably say that that's something we still adhere to. When we're thinking about this, we're talking about a generative AI solution. How much harder is it to secure than even what we're seeing today?
Yeah, it's actually much harder. Sometimes we joke Kindle is kind of HR for AI entities, right? Like when you bring one of these AIs into your business or your personal life, you're kind of hiring this alien intern, right? And you're giving it access to whatever data, and so it's just like kind of hiring a person. You have the same risk. Like the alien intern can click on links. You can ask ChatGPT to go visit websites. You mentioned it can read your email. Microsoft has co-pilots that read your email. They could click on links. And so you've inherited all the problems of a human when you bring it in, a really smart human that is very capable with all kinds of skill sets. They can code, they can talk in lots of languages, they can use all kinds of tools in your environment, right? Microsoft just shipped a Copilot for Excel, their latest stuff. It writes Python code in Excel. With the Python code, you can create anything, right? I could create weapons, taco stand software, like anything, right? Like it's a full environment to do whatever with. And so these AIs have access to it. And so you now have to think about, as a CISO or even a CIO or CEO even, what capabilities am I really turning over to this AI? Who's supervising that work? Just like you would supervise a human. What policies am I trying to enforce this thing to behave the way I want a human to behave? And how do I do that, right? Because a human, I control its paycheck, or I have criminal law or whatever. What's the threat to the AI, right? And so you have a whole new set of these things, and people have kind of blown right through them, because I think back to that first topic, they think of this as just a cloud service or something, and it's not at all, right? Like this is a much bigger decision you're making when you let these things roam around your business.
I mean, that's really interesting because I think we all joke about the iRobot, movie coming through, true, and you're telling us, and it is true that obviously these are models that are learning, and the guardrails and limits by design can be good intention, possible implications. And these models that are coming out, these foundational models, companies are trying to build off of them. People are trying to understand how, at a company level, they can take their IP and do something with a model that gives them more capabilities. I think that's something is still a question mark to me. I still haven't seen clear-cut, demonstrable examples of this is what AI is providing as an ROI, but we're early and people are still building and learning. When it comes to the actual IP and a company that is trying to build those core capabilities, talk to us a little bit about how important these models are, not just even at a company level, but down to a specific job level to be custom to a person.
Yeah, I think we've seen rapid advancement just in the last 2 years. It's been pretty light speed, like capability increases. OpenAI just shipped a whole new class of model on Thursday last week. That's going to change the game. Back to your ROI question, and really starting to highlight there's going to be some very clear ROI in certain areas. Software development is probably under great threat right now, both as augmenting humans to make them better, but also replacing them. It's pretty clear now that's coming. When you think about personalized AI or AI for particular roles, we think we'll see hundreds of them in businesses, maybe one for every employee. Actually, Jensen, the founder and CEO of NVIDIA, mentioned this at their big conference, I think back in March or April, the big GTC conference, where he saw the same thing. Like, he thinks there'll be thousands of models running around, even a mid-sized company, doing all kinds of specialized things. So a lot of small ones, plus the bigger, what we call the foundation models, the ChatGPT, Claudes of the world, Google Geminis, being general purpose kind of Q&A things to help you when you need the broader picture of things or deep learning and thinking about something. But employees, today it's possible any business with a decent sized tech team can do it, and some are doing it. Take a role. Today, it's often a customer support role is one of the low hanging fruits for AI to tackle. Expose the AI to the training corpus that you would train a customer service rep on. Give it access to the data that the customer service rep has data. Give it access to the transcripts of calls that a customer service rep has made. And you've now fine tune the model. You haven't done a full training. This could take hours to a few days. It could be $50 to $5,000, depending on kind of what you're trying to do. These are pretty simple things to do now. And now the model is much more tuned to talking like a customer service rep, answering the questions for your customer service rep. And so we're seeing those now come in, and not immediately replacing the customer service rep, there to augment, maybe take the first part of the call and hand it off, do the triage to get to the right person. Though some companies will be moving towards like, hey, this is good enough now. We should start replacing people with it. Mark Bienhoff from Salesforce talked about this at the All In Summit last week. I saw a little clip on X about it where he's like, we have models right now that we're targeting to replace customer service rep with for voice also, not, like the models talk as well as humans talk now. For a lot of use cases. And so that's an example. But you could create a personalized one for all kinds of things. Apple is going to do it with Apple Intelligence, actually. It'll ship in your iPhone probably this summer is when it looks like it's coming out. But the iPhone's going to, Siri is going to have access to all of the personal data on your phone. It doesn't leave Apple's ecosystem. A lot of it doesn't even leave your phone. Apple's probably a leader in thinking about protecting this data. But Siri's going to be aware, oh, you have a meeting coming up. You have a message coming to be somewhere else. It's conflicting in the time, and it'll automatically propose to you without you even asking, hey, I notice you have a conflict coming. Would you like me to fix it for you? So we'll see those kind of smaller things pop into that are dependent on the data. But the technology is here for sure. It's open source, so you don't have to pay for it if you want to learn it. But there are providers also that you can sign up for to help you tune these models, and then you're kind of off and running.
I think it's fascinating. I actually think that's a really interesting point about Apple trying to keep it on device, thinking ahead about some of these implications. When you start to think down the road and you're starting to think about the business application and you start looking at where this diverges from the consumer side, right? So I feel like we've kind of seen this evolution of technology, of enterprise, consumer, and consumers and enterprise have tried to sometimes meet. It's not always worked. We've seen companies go, "Oh, we want our apps to look like Facebook apps or Meta apps, or we want them to look like Instagram," and it's not worked. Is the notion of what we see in a chat GPT and people interacting with it in their day to day, are they going to experience something very different when they are going to be the co-pilot if they've never experienced this in the workplace?
Yeah, I think so. Like I think, but part of it is the whole software stack's getting ready to be reinvented. And because AI can just replace so much of it. If you think about a traditional SaaS app, pick on Salesforce again. Salesforce has this, if you're a customer service agent or whatever, you get a form on your screen. And maybe I'm calling into my insurance company, right? And you're the agent with a form on your screen. The first thing you're going to see is on the screen is it's going to ask the agent, hey, get the customer's name so you know who I'm dealing with, right? And then verify their address. And then, and I'll type all that in a form. And then the Salesforce will process that info, go back to its databases and come back and go, oh yeah, this is the Ron Williams that is our customer. Here's some info about them and maybe some other guidance to help Ron, right? That's how software as a service works today. If you think about AI coming into that place, AI can just listen to the call now and there's nothing for the sales agent to type in. So AI just hears, oh, he's dealing with Ron Williams. Oh, and I heard that it's, his address and, whatever. So AI will just go behind the scenes, go find the data itself. There's no form for it to type into. It's just going to go do it. It's going to bring it back to the agent and display it in some kind of different screen. So I don't know what Salesforce's role is there anymore. Right. And same thing with Workday for, your HR stuff or whatever you're doing. All that software is, in my opinion, at grave risk now. And it's pretty clear that you're not going to need a lot of it. Klarna's startup, their CEO, week before last came out and said they had built some internal apps with AI. They've now turned off their Salesforce, and Workday is the next thing they're going to turn off soon. And so it's already happening, with people who are technically more sophisticated or thinking more ahead. But next 2, 3, 5 year time horizon, I think we're going to see a lot of the software in the company change. And so, and that's not including if I replace that customer service agent with AI, I don't even have a need for Salesforce for that agent anymore. So I'm not even going to buy a seat from Salesforce anymore. So even if, like Salesforce has two problems, like potentially declining users that they're not going to be able to sell to, as well as AIs don't need their software, right? And so these are big things coming to deal with. And so how are you going to work in the future, in near future? I think it's going to change a lot. Right now, you're seeing it as bolt-ons, right? Where you have a little window and it's got a chat bot and you talk to it. Or Kindle, we bring you to a central place and bring your data there so you work there with a chat bot. But I think in the midterm, the 3, 5 year horizon, a lot of your software is not going to be there. You're just going to have an AI you're talking to, maybe like in the movie Her, where it's in your ear, and you also have a chatbot, maybe there may be a couple specialized interfaces. It's hard to imagine what those might look like or why you would need them. But the AI may have a camera watching you too, so it's getting more data from you, right, as well. So it can help you and predict kind of what you need. So I think that's going to be the big shift. So it may not be a piece of software you even see. It's just collecting everything about you and just throwing stuff up on your screen or making things happen for you. And you're just like, you take it for granted that it happened. And so that's where we're heading. And that has implications all the way back. Like, Salesforce is a big customer of clouds, Amazon or whoever. So if Salesforce struggles, then, and all of Amazon SaaS customers struggle, what happens to Amazon, right? So like the whole stack all the way down, and this is all existential for everything. And this is why I go back to, when you mentioned, if it's not your models, it's not your future. Like it's, these models are the thing going forward. It's not the cloud providers, not the SaaS apps or whoever. It's the model that is the future. And you need to start figuring out, especially in the business, how to build your models and get them to your employees and make those investments versus letting some third party who's deployed a cloud model to you benefit from all that. And then you have to play catch up at some point, right? Because once we hit that flipping point where the software stack, it's clear to everybody it's changing, you're going to be like, wait, where's my model? And it's going to be like, oh, it's at Amazon. And Amazon's dying because all their customers died, or Amazon's competing with me, right? And now what am I going to do, right? And so, that's the key thing where it comes from, that phrasing.
Interesting. Maybe final question, because I think the point you brought it up and you mentioned it's not your model, it's not your future. A lot of companies want to believe they're tech companies. A lot of companies are tech companies. Everyone is using tech. We get that. When it comes to this piece of generative AI, there's a certain cost that goes into building these foundational models. There's a certain amount of data and training. When you start looking out and saying it's not your model, it's not your future, how does a company, and this might be looking at the crystal ball, but as a company wants to build their own IP and their own competitive advantage via their model, how do you envision that happening?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. The ecosystem that allows you to build models and train them, and even create the data sets, that's all gotten way easier. And there are software providers and SaaS providers that can help you do that now. You don't need an AI expert in your company to do this pretty effectively. If you want to train a very big, expensive AI model that competes with ChatGPT, you need AI experts still. That's definitely still an ivory tower of knowledge and secrets. But if you're just running an enterprise and I just need a model for my customer support side or my HR side or whatever, that's all within reach of a reasonably tech sophisticated company today. If you've got a bunch of software engineers running around and a data science team, you can figure that part out. And then there's tools. I'll be self-promotional here, but and we'll have competitors, but then you need a tool kind of like Kendo that helps you kind of orchestrate and control those models, still let people use the outside models if they're better than your inside stuff. Like, you got to think of that layer as well. Like, how am I going to manage it? And then you still have some infrastructure that you have to run these models on. And this is where the NVIDIA GPU thing is still important. They're starting to have competitors show up too. But if you're not going to trust the cloud provider's model, you still have to find some GPU somewhere. You could trust the cloud provider's GPUs because you can set that up in a way that they still can't see what's going on inside the GPUs, or you can go buy your own GPUs and run them in your data center or down the hall, or whatever. There's also a push, which, like Apple, we mentioned on device. Apple's helping on the personal side. It's possible to also, with MacBooks in particular, because of the way their hardware config works, this is much harder to do on Windows. But you can run powerful local models just on your MacBook and deploy those to all your employees or whatever, and to help keep everything super local if that was important, or if they needed to work when they're not connected to the internet and still talk to their AI. So all that tooling is now out there, and all that's getting better. So we're trying to make it turnkey for people that don't have as much sophisticated staff, but we're also make it easier for companies that may have it, but they don't want to spend time on that. They want their people working on higher value things as well. So the stack's coming. We're trying to help it, but more is coming. And I think you'll see all these topics you and I just talked about. I think there'll be more and more talked about as throughout next year. Next year, I think, is going to be a big turning point where people really start to see that, oh, I have a use case for this model, or that, oh, this model could really threaten lots of different jobs, and think more about it. We're early, but we're just on the cusp now, I think, of pretty mass awareness of what's going on.
I mean, it's obviously everything you mentioned seems very relevant from this point forward. I think the dynamics have obviously shifted. Kindle seems like a really fascinating company, because part of the solution, as I was kind of just on the website and taking a look, seems like it's thinking ahead about some of the problems we talked about. So obviously you're very familiar with these. If somebody wants to reach out to you to learn a little bit more or understand how Kindle might help, what's a good way of doing that?
Yeah, like, you can always email me, Ron at kendo.ai, but you can reach sales as well, or on the website. There's some contact forms too. We'd love to hear from everybody, either thoughts, insights, problems. Happy to help.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll put some of those links up there. Thanks for joining. Fascinating conversation. I think we might have to revisit in a year and see how much of what we started talking about did come true.
Yeah, well, it's great talking to you, Amir, and thank you again for the invite.
Absolutely. All right. That's the end of this episode. We'll be back again, different guests, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think this is a really interesting conversation. I know a lot of people have talked about AI. I think Ron just covered a lot of things that are really important if you are thinking about AI, and we're not always hearing on other shows, other content. So please share this with somebody else who's in the enterprise, in business, trying to solve some of these problems. Reach out to Kindle. I think they obviously a great wealth of knowledge to talk to. Also, let me know how the podcast is going for you. Like, subscribe, comment. Give me a hint if there's a topic that you want me to cover. I'll try to find a guest and do that. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.